መላው የኦሳ አባላት ቦርድ አባላት ለሁላችሁም ስለጋበዛችሁኝ አመሰግናለሁ። ረጅም መንገድ ተጉዤ የመጣሁት ምንድነው የምናገረው ይሄን ሁሉ ከተጓዝኩ በኋላ ምንድነው የምናገረው የሚለው ትንሽ አሳስቦኝ ነበር። ግን በቀላሉ አሰብኩት። እኔ ተራኪ ነኝ። መጽሐፎችን ስጽፍ ያጋጠመኝን አንዳንድ ነገሮችና የማስበውን ስለ አፍሪካ ቀንድ አካባቢ ህዝቦች የማስበውን አንዳንድ የጻፍኳቸው ነገሮች አሉ። እነሱን አነባለሁ። እውነት ነው። ለአማርኛ ስነ ጽሁፍ ከአካባቢው ቋንቋዎች ሁሉ በተሻለ ደረጃ ላይ እንዲገኝ ኦሮሞዎች አስተዋጽኦ አድርገዋል። ከነዚህ መካከል ጸጋዬ ገብረመድህንና እኔን መጥቀስ ይቻላል። ስለዚህ አማርኛ ቋንቋ ነው ያሳደግነው ቋንቋ ነው። ሁላችንም እንደሰርተንበታል። በአማርኛ ቋንቋ ሽፋን የደረሱ በደሎችን ወደ ጎን እንተዋቸዋለን። ቋንቋ ግን በቋንቋነቱ መሳሪያ ነው። እንደዛ ነው። በጣም ብዙ ጠላት አለኝ በዚህ ሰዓት። እዚህ በአፍሪካ ቀንድ በተለይ ኢትዮጵያ ተባለችው ሀገር ጸሐፊ ሆኖ ጸሐፊ ለመሆን የወሰነ ሰው ጠላት ብቻ አይደለም ሞትም ይደርስበታል። ባሉ ግርማን ገደሉት። አቤ ጎበኛንም እንዲሁ መንገድ ላይ ገደሉት። ሌሎችም በርካታ ጸሐፊዎች ተገለዋል። እኔ የቡርቃ ዝምታን ጽፌ ባለስልጣን ነበርኩ የወያኔ በዚያ ሰዓት። ጽፌ ወደ ማተሚያ ቤት ሲሄድ ከዚህ በኋላ ጽፋለሁ ብዬ አልገመትኩም። ለዛ ነው የደፈርኩት። የመጨረሻ ሊሆን ስለሚችል መሸወድ የለብኝም ማለት ለራሴ። እንደ ባሉ ግርማ መታለል የለብኝም። ባሉ ግርማ በኦሮማይ እንደሚሞት ቢያውቅ ኖሮ ከዛ የተሻለ ይሰራል። ስለዚህ የማምንበትን በትክክል ማስቀመጥ አለብኝ ብዬ ወደ ማተሚያ ቤት ሄድኩኝ። አለው አሁን እየታረኩ ነው ማለት ነው። በቅድሚያ ስለ ቡርቃ ዝምታ መናገር ፈልጋለሁ። ቡርቃ ወንዝ አርሲ ውስጥ የሚገኝ ወንዝ ነው። ሄጄ ኮፈሌ አካባቢ አንድ ወር ያህል ተቀምጫለሁ። የአካባቢውን ምግብ እየተመገብኩ ገበሬዎች ጋር በጣም የሚገርመው እንደዚህ የተደረመሰ መሬት ላይ ነው የሚታየው ወንዙ እና ልክ እንደ ሸበሌ እንደነ አዋሽ በከፍተኛ ፍጥነት ነው የሚጓዘው ወንዙ። ይታያል እንደዚህ መሬት ውስጥ ነው የሚጓዘው እና የአካባቢው ሰዎች ቢሻን ሰይጣን ይታል። ለምን ከብቶች ከቡርቃ ውሃ ሲጠጡ ይታመማሉ፣ ይሞታሉ። እና ውሃው የተረገመ ውሃ ይመስላቸዋል። ምናልባት ስራስር ወንዙ እየነካቸው የሚያልፋቸው መርዛማ ስራስሮች ሊኖሩ ይችላሉ። ከብቶች ወደዛ ግን አያስጠጓቸው። እና እዛ ወንዙ ጋር ቁጭ ብዬ ያለ ነው ስለ ወንዙ ምናባዊ ስዕል ልስል የሞከርኩት እና የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ምሳሌ ይታያል። እና የጸጋዬ ገብረመድህንን አዋሽ እያነበብኩ ነበር አስታውሳለሁ። እና አዋሽ የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ምሳሌ ይመስለኛል። አዋሽ ይወቅሰዋል ጸጋዬ ገብረመድህን እና አባይ አገር አቋርጦ ሲጓዙ ሌሎችም ባህር ሰንጥቀው ውቅያኖስ ሲገቡ አዋሽ ነው የመጫሱ ለማሰብ ፍሳሽ አዋሽ ምን ነው አንተ ብቻ ታንቀህ እንደዚህ ታፍነህ ቁጭ አልክ እያለ ቁጭቱን አዋሽ ላይ ያወርደው ነበር ጸጋዬ ገብረመድህን። የተደራሲ መብት የሚባል ነገር አለ። የተጻፉ ነገሮችን ተደራሲ እንደፈለገው መገንዘብ ይችላል፣ መብት አለ። እና አዋሽ የኦሮሞ ሕዝብ ምሳሌ ይመስለኝ ነበር። ቡርቃ ደግሞ ሌላ የኦሮሞ ሕዝብ ምሳሌ ነው። ቡርቃ ደግሞ የተደበቀው አቅሙን ቀደም ሲል ቡርቃ ከምኒልክ ወረራ በፊት ማለት ነው ተራራ የዘለለ ይጓዝ ነበር። ገደል እየዘለለ ይሄድ ነበር። እረኞች ይዘፍኑለት ነበር። ከብቶች ውሃ ያጠጡ ነበር ከቡርቃ ወንዝ። በኋላ ግን ምኒልክ መጥቶ የዛን ጀግናና ኩሩ ሕዝብ መብቶች ሲነጥቅ ቡርቃ ልክ እንደ ዘንዶ ሰውነቱን ሰብስቦ መሬት ውስጥ ገባ። ነፃነታችሁን ካላገኛችሁ አታዩኝም ማለት ነው ብዬ ነው ያሰብኩት። እንግዲህ ይሄ ስነ ጽሁፍ ነው። ህዝብና ህዝብን የሚያጋጭ አይደለም። ይሄ ስነ ጽሁፍ ነው። እውነት ነው። የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ተነጥቋል፣ መሬቱን ተነጥቋል፣ መብቱን ተነጥቋል እና በቡርቃ መመሰል እና የቡርቃ ዝምታ ለመጻፍ ከወሰንኩ በኋላ ሁለት ገጸ ባህሪያቶች ፍለጋ ውስጥ ገባሁ። የአኖሌን ታሪክ አውቃለሁ። አንዳንድ ወገኖች እንደሚናገሩት የአኖሌን ጭፍጨፋን የፈጠርኩት ልቦለድ ድርሰት አይደለም። ምናልባት አላነበቡም ወይ ደግሞ ታሪክ መካድ ልማዳቸው የሆነ የአኖሌ ታሪክ ልቦለድ ድርሰት አድርገው ያቀርቡታል። እሱ ብዙም ያስደንቅ አይደለም። አኖሌ ጭፍጨፋ የተካሄደበት ቦታ ስለሆነ አኖሌ ዋቆ ፈጠር አኖሌ ዋቆ ልቦለድ ድርሰት ነው። የአኖሌ ጭፍጨፋ ግን ልቦለድ አይደለም። አኖሌ ዋቆ ሰው ሆነ፣ ባህሪ ግን አልነበረው። አኖሌ ዋቆ የሚል ስም ሰጠው፣ ባህሪው ግን አልነበረው። እንደ ቱቦው ባዶ ነበር፣ ቀፎ ሰው ነበር። አሁን ከየት አምጥቼ ነው ለአኖሌ ባህሪ የምሞላለት ቁጭ ብዬ ሳስብ ገለሳ ሊጎርና ሌንጮ ለታ ጨፍልቄ አንድ ያደረኳቸውና አኖሌ ውስጥ በትክክል ያደረኩት። አሁን አኖሌ ሰው ሆነ፣ ገለሳና ሌንጮ እዛ ውስጥ ገብተው ሰው ሆነ። አኖሌ መግደል ብቻ ያለው ሁለቱን ለመለያየት ነው። አኖሌ አልሞተም። ሁለቱንም ውጦ ሰው በዘላለም ይኖራል እና ገለሳ ደስ የሚለኝ አንድ ባህሪ ያለው ትዕቢት አለው። ትዕቢት በሁለት ተከፍለዋለሁ። ባዶ ትዕቢት አለ፣ የሚፈለግ አስፈላጊ የሆነ ትዕቢትም አለ። ሌንጮ ሽሙጥ በጣም ደስ ይለኛል። ሌንጮ ቀልዶቹን ሽሙጡን በሙሉ አኖሌ ሰጠሁት እዛ ውስጥ። እንዴት ይናደዳል ሌንጮ። ሲናደድ በጣም ነው ደስ የሚለው፣ ያምርበታል። እና አኖሌ ዋቆ የሌንጮና የገለሳ ባህሪ ነው የሰራሁት ማለት ነው። ደራሲ ሰው የመፍጠር መብት ስለተሰጠው ሰው ሰራው ማለት ነው። አሁን አኖሌ አንድ ፍቅረኛ ታስፈልገው ነበር። ያው በልቦለድ በታሪክ ቀመስ ልቦለድ ውስጥ አንድ ወንድና አንድ ሴት መሆን ስላለባቸው ነው። አወኒ ዋቆ ሁለቱም እናትና አባታቸው ተገለዋል። ስለዚህ የአካባቢው አንድ ዋቆ አባዱላ የሚባሉ ናቸው ያሳደጓቸው። ለዚህ ነው በዋቆ አባዱላ ስም የሚጠሩት አወኒና አኖሌ እንጂ አባታቸው አይደለም ዋቆ። ሲያድጉ ይጋባሉ ብለው አንድ ላይ ያሳደጓቸው ከጭፍጨፋ ውስጥ የተረፉ ናቸው። እና አወኒ ለስላሳ አልኳት። ካለው ስርዓት ጋር ተደራድረን መሄድ እንችላለን የሚል አቋም ያላት ለስላሳ አደረኳት። ወቅቱ መራራ ጉዲና የሱ አይነት ጠባይ ስለነበረ መራራ ጉዲና ስል እንግዲህ በፖለቲካ አመለካከቱን ባህሪውን ነው እንጂ አወኒ ጾታ ሴት እዛ ውስጥ ጨመርኩና እንግዲህ ሌንጮና ገለሳ ከመራራ ጋር ነው ጦርነት የሚከፍቱት። ሁለቱም የአንድ አባት ልጆች ናቸው። አወኒ አኖሌ ልትለውጠው ትጥራለች፣ አይሰማትም። አኖሌ አይሰማትም። አኖሌ ምንድነው የሚለው? ኃይል ያስፈልጋል፣ እጄ ላይ ኃይል ያስፈልጋል። ኃይል ካለ ብቻ ነው ቁጭ ብዬ የምደራደረው። አንድ ጊዜ አኖሌ ተከቦ ነበር። አባቦኮ ቢባል ተራራ ላይ አርሲ ውስጥ ተከቦ ነበር። የሀየሎ መራያ ሰራዊት ነው የከበበው። ሊገሉት አልፈለጉም ወያኔዎች። በጣም እብሪተኛ ነው። ሻዕቢያም ያውቁታል አኖሌ እና ወያኔዎች እኛን አይሰማንም ብለው በሻዕቢያ ሰው ላኩበት እና ተከበሃል አኖሌ፣ ምንም ማምለጫ የለም፣ ትሞታለህ፣ ስለዚህ እጅህን ስጥ አለ። አብርሃ የሚባል የሻዕቢያ ካድሬ ነው ሄዶ ይሄንን የሚለው። አብርሃ እናንተ ነፃነታችሁን አግኝታችኋል፣ ኮምፒሽታቶ ላይ ደንሱ፣ ሄድ ተመለሳንታል። ተከበሃል ያልከው ግን የተከበባችሁት እናንተ ናችሁ ብለህ ንገራቸው። የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ከቧችኋል። ተረካው እንደዚህ ነበር። መረራ ጉዲና መጨረሻ ተስፋ እንደሚቆርጥ አውቀ ነበር። ልክ ዛሬ እንደሱ ደረጃ ይመስለኛል አወኒ መጨረሻ ታስራ ተስፋ ቆርጣ ወያኔ ጋር መስራት አይቻልም ወደ ማለት ደረሰች። መረራም እንደሱ ሲል ሰምቻለሁ በቅርቡ። ነብይ ነኝ እያልኳል እንደዛ እንደሚሆን ግልጽ ነበር። መረራ በመጨረሻ ተስፋ እንደሚቆርጥ ግልጽ ነበር። ድካሙ ሁሉ ፍሬ እንደማያፈራ ግልጽ ነበር። የአኖሌ ንዴቱ ይበዛል፣ አመፀኛ ነው፣ ምናልባትም አደገኛ ነው። ግን እውነት አለ። አንተ ማንን ነው የምትደግፈው? አኖሌን ወይስ አወልን የሚባል ማንንም አልደግፍም። ራሳቸውን ችለው የሚጓዙ ሰዎች ሆነዋል። በዛ አይደላቸው አልችልም። የሆነ በትክክል እንደዚህ ነበር። አወኒ አብረን መኖር እንችላለን፣ ኢትዮጵያውያን በተለይ አማሮች ወንድሞቻችን ናቸው እያለች ትናገራለች። ታይና ደግሞ እንደማይሆን ይገባታል። የሚደረገውን ስታይ በተለይ ኦፒዲዮ የሚባለው የማይመስሉ ሰዎች ስትመለከት ተስፋ ትቆርጣለች። እንዴት ከእነዚህ ሰዎች ጋር መስራት ይቻላል ትላለች። እና አኖሌና አወኒ ልክ በዚህ መንገድ ይዣቸው ሄድኩኝ ማለት ነው። መጨረሻስ በዛን ሰዓት እነ ዳውድ ኦነግ አስመራ ላይ ይሄ መጽሐፍ ሲታተም አስመራ ኦሮሞ የሚባል ነበር። ወሰድኩና መጽሐፉ ሲታተም አወኒና አኖሌ አስመራ ላይ ይገናኛል። እሺ አሁን ምን እናድርግ? እዛ ጋር ነው መጽሐፉ ያልከው፣ አልቀጠለም። ምክንያቱም ታሪክም እዛ ጋር ስለቆመ ታሪክ እዛ ጋር ቆመ። አወኒ ኮንፊውዝድ እንደሆነች አኖሌ እንደተንገበገበ ቆመ። ቀጥሎ ምን ሆናል? እኔ ምን አውቃለሁ? ቀጥሎ ምን ሆናል? ወደፊት ቢሆነው ካለ ነው የምጽፈው። ልቦለድ ታሪክ ከመስልበት ስለሆነ የቡርቃ ዝምታ ለምን እንደሚወቅሱት አይገባኝም። የኦሮሞና የአማራን ህዝብ ሊያጋጭ የሚል ባንዲራ ተሸልሟል፣ ታርጋ ተለጥፎልኛል። እኔ በጣም ለአማራ ህዝብ ፍቅር አለ። በደንብ የአማራን ገበሬ አውቃለሁ፣ የትግራይን ገበሬ አውቃለሁ፣ ኦሮሞን ደግሞ ተወልጄ ያደግኩበት ሁሉንም አውቃለሁ። ህዝብ ልጠላ አልችልም። በጣም አፈቅራለሁ እና ጨካኝ መሆናቸውን ነው የሚያሳየው ሰዎቹ። ይህን መጽሐፍ የሚታችሁ ምን ያህል ጨካኝ ነው፣ ሰብአዊነት የሌላቸው መሆናቸውን ነው የሚያሳየው እንጂ ለምንድን ነው የአኖሌን ቁጣ ማየት? እኔ ጫማዬን እግሬን አኖሌ ጫማ ውስጥ ከትቼ ነው የጻፍኩት። ሲናደድ እናደዳለሁ፣ ሲያለቅስ አለቅስ ነበር። ከአወኒ ጋርም በጣም አይከብድም። አኖሌ የሚባል እብድ ሰው ሊመጣባችሁ ነው፣ እባካችሁ ንቁ እያለች አወኒ ብትለምናቸው አልሰማም። አዎ አኖሌ የሚመሳሰሉ ሰዎች ባለፈው በግንቦት ወር ምን እንዴት እንደተነሱ አይቻለሁ። እኔ አይደለም የፈጠርኳቸው ነበሩ፣ እነሱን የነገሩኝ እኮ አርሲ ሲሄድ እነሱን የነገሩኝ። በጣም ጥቼ ነው ያን ኦሮሞን ልብ መፈጥረው። የቁርቃ ዝምታን አንድ ኦሮሞ ሲያነብ እኮ ከሚያውቀው 1% እንኳን አይሆንም። እንዴት ነው የሚነሳሳው? እሱ ከዛ በላይ እኮ ያውቃል፣ ብዙ ነገር ያውቃል። አውቆ ዝም ስላለ ነው። የቁርቃ ዝምታ የሚባል አንድ ትንሽ ልቦለድ ተጻፈና ነው። ይሄን ንቀት ነው። ይሄን የምናገረው ለእናንተ አይደለም። እዛ ጋር ኢትዮቱ የሚባል ጋዜጠኞች አሉ፣ ቀርተው ይሄን ዛሬ ስለሚለቁት እዚህ ለሌሎች ነው የምናገረው። በዚህ አክብራችሁ ላደረጋችሁልኝ ለዚህ አቀባበል አመሰግናለሁ። ምክንያቱም ከትላንት ወዲያ አንድ ኢሜል ደርሶኝ ነበር። ጫልቱ እንደ ኃይለን ብለህ የጻፍከው ጽሁፍ የኢትዮጵያን ሕዝብ የሚያበጣብጥ ነው እና የኢትዮጵያን ሕዝብ ይቅርታ ልትጠይቅ ይገባሃል የሚል ደብዳቤ ደረሰ። የኢትዮጵያ ሕዝብ ማን ነው? እርማችሁን አውጡ የላችሁበት። ይሄ ንግግር ቅስቀሳ ነው ተብሎ እንደሚተረጎም አውቃለሁ። በጣም ደስ የሚለው ግን በእድሜም በትምህርትም በማንኛውም ከሪ የምትበልጡ ሰዎች ፊት ስለምናገር ቅስቀሳ ሊሆን አይችልም። ይሄንን ነው ማለት ነው። አሁን ወደ ወረቀት ወደ አዘጋጀሁት ልሂድ። ጫልቱ ሚደቅሳ ቆፍቱ በተባለች መንደር በሰላምና በደስታ ትኖር ነበር። መንገድ የለም ወደ ቆፍቱ የሚያስገባ። እድለኞች ስለነበሩ መንገድ አልገባላቸው። መንገዱን ተከትሎ የሚመጣው ጣጣ ሁሉ አልደረሰባቸው። ጫልቱ ከ2000 ዓመት በፊት ወይም ከ5000 ዓመት በፊት እንደነበሩት ኦሮሞዎች መኖር የቻለችው መንገድ ስላልገባ ነው። እዛ አካባቢ አንድ ሾር ገዛት ወደ አቃቂ በሰፋ ወስደዋት ነበር። ከዛ በተረፈ ግን ጉራቻ የተባለ ፈረሷን በቱሉ ጁምቱ ኮረብቶች ላይ ስትጋልብ ነው። ወደ ጌንጃ ነበር ጉዞዋ፣ ወደ ወልመራ ነበር የምትሄደው። እሷ ትልልቅ ከተሞች ነድሬ ናቸው። ጫልቱ ልብስ ብዙ አያስጨንቃትም። የሆነ ነገር ጣል አድርጋ ዘላ ፈረሷ ላይ ወጣ የምትሄድ ናት። ሁለት ሆነው ሊጠልፏት በፈረስ ሲከታተሏት እየሳቀች ነው የምታመልጣቸው። ጫልቱ ጀግና ናት። ስትስቅ እንደሚተኮስ ጥይት ነው ድምጿ ከጉሮሮዋ የሚወጣው። ምን አለው የሚስላት ጫልቱ ነው። አላየኋትም። ጫልቱ ልቦለድ አይደለችም። ጫልቱ በህይወት የነበረች ሴት አዲስ አበባ መሄድ የምትችሉ ወደ አቃቂ ሄዳችሁ ቆፍቶ ሄዳችሁ ቆቦ መድኃኔዓለም የሚባል የኦርቶዶክስ ቤተክርስቲያን ውስጥ የጫልቱ ሚደቅሳ መቃብር የቱ ነው ብላችሁ ጠይቁ። ከዛም አበባ አስቀምጡላት። በህይወት የነበረች ሴት ናት። ጫልቱ እንደሚደቅሳ ጫልቱ እንደ ሄለን የተባለውን ትረካ ያነበባችሁ እዛ ውስጥ ልቦለድ ሆኖ የገቡት መምህር ጽጌ እና ሳምሶን የተባለው ጫልቱን የሚያረዳ ተማሪ ናቸው። የጫልቱ እህት አክስት በህይወት አለች አዲስ አበባ። ባሏ አለ። የባሏን ባህሪ ትንሽ አስተካክያለሁ ጥሩ እንዲሆን አደረኩት። በተረፈ መምህር ጽጌ ያንዳርጋቸው ጽጌን አባት ነው የወሰድኩት። በጣም ባላንስ አድርጌ ልሰራ ፈለኩ። ምክንያቱም አማራ ህዝብ የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ጠላት አይደለም ነው ጫልቱ እንደሄለን ጽፎ እኮ ተራው አማራ ህዝብ ጠላት አይደለም የሚል መልእክት ነው ለማስተላለፍ። ጫልቱን የበደላት ሲስተሙ ነው፣ ሰዎች አይደለም ነው መልእክቱ። እነሱ እኮ ናቸው ማሰራጨት የነበረባቸው። እንዴት ነው ሊያፍኑት የሚሞክሩት? ዋሽንግተን ዲሲ ላይ ነው እኮ እና ጫልቱ አክስቷን በደለቻት። ግን አክስቷን በደላት ሲስተሙ ነው። አኒበሌ ያለች እንዳታለቅስ አደረጓት። በትርጉም አለቀስ እንዴት ተለቀሱ? ይዘንት እኔ ጥናት ጽሑፍ አይደለም ማቀርብ፣ ጥናት ጽሑፍ አቅርቤ ማለት አዳምጬ ነው ማለት ህይወት ነው የምጽፈው። የሰው ህይወት ያንዲት ተራ ሴት ያልተማረች ሴት ህይወት። ጫልቱ ፈረሷን ነጠቋትና ታኮ ጫማ ሰጥቷት ከዛ አሮጌ ቦርሳ አንጠልጥለው ዘመናዊ ነሽ አሏት። ወደ ቆፍቱ ስትሄድ መሳቂያ ሆነች። ግን ያቺ ጆሌ ወረገላ እያለች በፈረስ የምትጋለበው ጫልቱ ናት እቺ እያሉ ተጠቋቁሙባት። በተከበረችበት መንገድ ተሸማቀቀች ጫልቱ። ለሁሉ ምን እንደሚደረግ አታውቅም። ለጫልቱ የሚሻላት እንደ አስሊ ኦሮሞ ጠመንጃ መያዝ ነበር። ጫልቱ ጠመንጃ አንስታ ቢሆን ኖሮ የውስጧ ሐውልት አይሰበርም ነበር። ከበው እኮ እንደ ከበቧት አላወቀችም። ከበው ነው የገደሏት ጫልቱ። ሰዎች አይደለም የገደሏት፣ ሲስተሙ። ይሄንን ለማሳየት ሞከርኩና ተቆጡ ሰዎች። ልታጋጨው ነው። በጣም የሚገርም የጫልቱ ታሪክ ያስታርቃል። እነሱ ቢያትሙት ይሻል ነበር። ዛሬ በጫልቱ አሳታሚ ከሚታተም እነሱ ቢያትሙት ይሻል። ድል ነበር። ትልቅ ድል አመለጣቸው። ጫልቱን ሊያፍኗት ሞከሩ። ጫልቱ ግን አሳታሚ ሆና መጣች። የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ራሱን በራሱ ማስተዳደር ሲጀምር ጫልቱ ሚደቅሳ በተዋረደችበት አንገቷን በደፋችበት ፊንፊኔ ከተማ ሐውልት እንዲቆምላት ተጠይቃለች። ወሰኑ ሐውልቱ ስም ጫልቱ ሚደቅሳ ስርዓታዊ ሽብር ሰለባ ተብሎ በተለያዩ ቋንቋዎች እንዲጻፍ እመኛለሁ። ምክንያቱም ጫልቱ ምሳሌ ናት። የጫልቱ ህይወት የኦሮሞዎቹ ህይወት የአብዛኛው ኦሮሞዎች ህይወት። በእርግጥ እንደ ጫልቱ ከገጠር ወደ ከተማ የመጡ አንዳንዶቹ እንደ ጫልቱ ሳይሰበሩ በጥሰው ታለፉ። አንዳንዶቹ ደንግጠው ወደ ገጠር ተመለሱ። አንዳንዶቹ ተመሳስለው ኖሩ። አንዳንዶቹ ደግሞ ሞቱ። ጫልቱ መሞቷ ተገቢ ነበር። ከዛ በኋላ ህይወት አለበት። ጊዜ አለ ብዬ አምናለሁ። በህይወት መኖር ብቻውን ስኬት አይደለም። በነፃነታቸው የታገሉ አዲስ አበባ ላይ በዙሪያው ሰሞኑን የምናየው ግድያ ህይወትን ጠልተው አይደለም። ከክብር ሌላ ምንም ነገር ስለሌለ ያለ ክብር ህይወት ስለሌለ ኦቦ ገረሱ ቱፋ ስሙን ላነሳው ፈልጋለሁ። የጫልቱን ታሪክ ከኔ በፊት ለብዙ ሰዎች ነግሮ ነበር። እሱ እንዳጫወተ ከአምስተርዳም ወደ ፓሪስ በአውቶቡስ እየሄድን ያለ ነው የጫልቱን ታሪክ የነገረኝ። አንድ ጊዜ ገረሱ ቱፋ ታሞ ወደ ቄስ ወሰዱትና ስሙ ነው በሽታው ነው። ገረሱ ቱፋ አባቱን ያመሰግናል። እንዲህ ብሎ ተመለሰ። ይሄን እየቀለደ የሳቀ ነው ያጫውተኝ። እሱ አሸንፈው ከወጡት ነው ጀግና ደስ ይላል። አሸንፈው ከወጡት አንዱና አሸንፈው መውጣት ካልቻሉ አንድ ሰው ታሪክ ልንገር ብሎ ነው የጫልቱን ታሪክ የጀመረው። ሲነግረን እዚህ ጉሮሮዬ ላይ ነው መራራ ነገር የመጣው። በተረጋግቼ እንኳን ልሰማው አልቻልኩም። ሞታ አደረች ሲለኝ ጧት ማታ ላይ እንትኑን ሊከፍቱ እንደዚህ ራትሪ ይሏት እንዲህ ሲሉ የለች። ስለራሱ የነበራት ኩራት ሰማይ ደርሶ ስለነበረ የደረሰባትን ነገር መሸከም ያቃታት አቅፏት ነው ሞተች። ድርቅ ብላለች እና በንቲ ዳሞን ልጅ ጽፏል። ሰው 2 ወር ፈጀብኝ። ትምህርት ቤት ያለች ስፖርት ውድድር ላይ አሸንፋ አጨብጭቡላት ሲባል ሲጨበጨብላት በጣም ደስ ብሏት ከጎን ሲሰድቧት ሰዎች ከዛ ሽንቅቅ አለች። ሄዳ ቁጭ አለች። የስፖርት አስተማሪ ኦሮሞ ነበር። እሱ አልገባውም። ይሄ ግን ቁንጅናዋን አይቶ ነው ሄዶ ሊያናገራት ሲሞክር ኦሮሞኛ ነገር ከዛ ታምናታለች። አትናገሪ አማርኛሽን ያጠፋብሻል ስላለቻት አመነቻት። አክስቷት ወዳለ ለዛ ነው ፈን ታርጋው ኦሮሞኛ ነው። እዛ ጋር ያለቀስኩ ልጻፍኩት ፕሮፓጋንዳ በእንባ ይጻፋል። እኔ በስሜት ነው ይጻፋል። ጫልቱ ጎረቤቴ ናት። ገላን ቆፍቱ ታውቁት ካላችሁ በእኛ ደግሞ በብሾፍቱ በኩል በጀርባ በድሬ በኩል ኩታ ገጠም እሷ የተነፈሰችውን አየር ነው ተንፈሻለሁ። እሷ የሮጠችባቸውን ኮረብቶች በፈረስ ባይሆን በእግር ሮጬበታለሁ እና ጋራ ጉራቻ ቆመን የራር ተራራን እያየን ያደግነው ከረኞች ጋር የዘፈንን ምን አገባህ አንሰው ወሎ ይጠይቁኛል። ለምንድን ነው ማያገባኝ? እኔ ኦሮሞ ዝማታ አካል ነው ያደረኩት ግን አላውቅም እንዴት እንደተገነባ አላውቅም። ኤርትራ ሄድኩና እናትና አባቴ መንደር ውስጥ ሄጄ ቁጭ አልኩኝ ባለፈው። አዎ ይሄ እናትና አባቴ አገር ነው። ልክ እናቴ የተወለደችበት አባቴ የተወለደበት ቦታ ሄጄ ቁጭ አልኩኝ። ምንም ነገር የለም። ልቤ ቢሾፍቱ ነው። ምን ላድርግ? እንዴት አድርጌ እና ማንነት የሚባለው የብዙ ነገሮች ግንባታ ነው። እሺ ሰዓቴም እያለቀ ነው። አንድ ሁለት ነጥቦች አነሳለሁ ከዚሁ ጋር ዶክተር ነጋሶ ቢላዳን ሳልጠቅስ ማለፍ ስለማልፈልግ ነው። በአንድ ወቅት ከኦሮሞ በላይ ኦሮሞነት ይሰማዋል ብለው ነበር። ብዙ ጭብጨባ አግኝተዋል ዶክተር ነጋሶ ቢላዳ። ለዛ ጭብጨባ መልስ መስጠት ፈልጋለሁ። እኔ ከኦሮሞነት በላይ ኦሮሞነት አይሰማኝም። ልክ እንደ ኦሮሞ ግን ኦሮሞነት ይሰማኛል። ይሄንን ማንም አይከለክልም። ወደፊት እንቀጥልበታለሁ። ለሚያማቸው ለሌላ ይዘጋል። በቅርቡ የጀሚላ እናት የሚል አዲስ መጽሐፍ ለገበያ ያቀርባለሁ። ጠንካራ መጽሐፍ ነው። በርካታ የኦሮሞ ጉዳዮችን ይዟል። ከዚህ መካከል ሊባን የት ነህ የሚል አለ። በስደት ስላሉ ኦሮሞዎች ነው። የቡልቻ እብሪት የሚል ደግሞ አለ። አንድ ከጫልቱ ተቃራኒ የሆነ ጠባይ ያለው ኦሮሞ ገጸ ባህሪ ነው። ብዙ 33 ተረካዎችን የያዘ መጽሐፍ ነው። ይህን በዚህ አጋጣሚ መግለጽ አስፈላጊ ሆኖ ስለተሰማኝ ነው። በመጨረሻ በአፍሪካ ቀንድ ደረጃ ምንድነው ለችግራችን መፍትሄ የሚል ጥያቄ አእምሮ ላይ አለ። ምናልባት ህልም ሊመስል ይችላል፣ ልቦለድ ድርሰት ሊመስል ይችላል። ልቦለድ ድርሰት ደራሲ ስለሆንኩ ሊሆን ይችላል። ቅዠት የሚመስል ህልሜ በሆርን ኦፍ አፍሪካ ደረጃ እንድናስብ እሷን ብቻ በማንበብ ጽሑፌን አበቃለሁ። በጋራ ሊያስማማ የሚችል እውነት አለ። ከዚህ በኋላ ኦሮሞና ኦሮሚያን በነባሩ መንገድ ጨፈላልቆ መግዛት አይቻልም። በትክክል ነባሩን የአፈና መንገድ በማስቀጠል የኦሮሞን ህዝብ ጥያቄ ማፈን እንደማይቻል ታውቋል። በመሆኑም ከአንድ ከባድ ፍጻሜ በኋላ ቢሆን የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ካሰበው ቦታ ላይ ይደርሳል ብዬ አስባለሁ። ያልታወቀው ነገር ቢኖር አፈጻጸሙ ነው። አመጣጡ ከባድ ሊችል መታዘብ ይችላል። በ2014 ግንቦት ወር የተከሰተው የኦሮሞ ህዝብ አመጽ የትልቁ ምስል ማሳያ ነው። ሊመጣ የሚችለውን ከባድ ጊዜ ከወዲሁ በማወቅ መስዋዕትነቱን ለመቀነስ የሚቻል ይመስለኛል። የቀድሞ ገዢዎች የገነቡት ኢትዮጵያዊነት ቅርጫት ሊጠገን ወይም ሊቀጥል በማይችልበት ደረጃ ማርጀቱን መተማመን ከተቻለ ሊመጣ የሚችለውን ደም መፋሰስ ለማስወገድና ለማስቀረት በጋራ መስራቱ ይበጃል። የኦሮሞ ህዝብ ራሱን በራሱ ማስተዳደር ብቻ ሳይሆን በአገሪቱ ውስጥ ለሚገኙ ህዝቦች ኃላፊነት ተሰጥቶት በጎ አስተዋጽኦ ያደርግ ዘንድ እድል መስጠት ያስፈልጋል። አብላጫነቱን ማክበር ጠቃሚ ነው። የኦሮሞን ህዝብ ተፈጥሯዊ መብት በመከልከል ታሪኩን በመካድ በመዝለልና በማጠልሸት መቀጠል አለመቻሉ ግልጽ ሆነ። ነባሩ መንገድ አርጅቶ ሞቷል። በመሸፋፈን መጪውን መራር እውነት ማዘግየት አይቻልም ብያለሁ። ኦሮሞዎች በኢትዮጵያዊነት ማንነት ላይ ያላቸውን ቅሬታ በተደጋጋሚ አሳይተዋል። በሰሜን ገዢዎች አሻጥር መሰላቸታቸውን የሚያስገነዝብ ምልክቶችን ሰጥተዋል። ናይጄሪያ ጋር ዓለም ዋንጫ የጥሎ ማለፍ ግጥሚያ ሲያደርጉ ወጣት ኦሮሞዎች አዳማ ላይ ተሰብስበው ናይጄሪያን ይደግፉ ነው። በ2014 የግንቦት ወር የኦሮሞዎች አመጽ ሲቀጠቀጥ ኦሮሞዎች የኢትዮጵያን ባንዲራ ወርደው ሲያቃጥሉ በቪዲዮ አይቻለሁ። ከኦሮሞዎች ባንዲራውን ማቃጠል በላይ አስገራሚ ሆኖ የኢትዮጵያ ባንዲራ ሲቃጠል ሌሎች ኢትዮጵያውያን ቆመው ይህ ክስተት ኢትዮጵያዊነት ላይ ያሳደሩትን አሉታዊ አመለካከት መጠቆሙ ብቻ ሳይሆን ሌሎች የኦሮሞን ኦሮሚያዊነት መቀበላቸውን ያሳያል። ከዚያም አልፎ ኢትዮጵያ ባንዲራና ኢትዮጵያዊነት ባለቤት የማጣት አደጋ ላይ መሆናቸውን ያመለክታል። ምንድነው መፍትሄው? እኔም ነው የአካባቢያችን ህዝቦች በላቀ አካባቢ ጥቅም ላይ የተመሰረተ አንድነት ሊገቡ እንደሚገነባ ሀሳብ ማቅረብ ፈልጋለሁ። ሀሳቡ አዲስ አይደለም። ሌሎች ተናግረውታል፣ ሌሎች ጽፈውታል፣ ሌሎች አጥንተውታል። በየመደርደሪያው የተወረወረ ሀሳብ ነው። በአፍሪካ ቀንድ ደረጃ ማሰብ ካልተቻለ የአካባቢያችን ሀገራት መሰነጣጠቅ ማቆሚያ ሊኖረው አይችልም። ጅቡቲን የሚያካክሉ ሀገራት ቁጥርን ስናበቃ የጦር መሳሪያ ነጋዴዎች ሲሳይ ሆነን እንቀራለን የሚል ስጋት አለ። አካባቢያችን በተፈጥሮ ሀብት የበለጸገ ነው። ከርሰ ምድራችን ሀብት ገና አልተነካም። የመልክዓ ምድራችን ስትራቴጂካዊ አቀማመጥ ፖለቲካዊ ዋጋ አለ። አካባቢያችን ህዝብ ትጉህ ሰራተኛ አርበኛ ነው። ለክብር በምንሰጠው ዋጋ እንመሳሰላለን። ጥቂት ጠለቅ ብለን ብንቆፍር ዘራችን ከአንድ ምንጭ መቀዳቱን እንረዳለን። ትምክህትና ጥላቻ ሳንደባልቅ ከተወያየን ለችግራችን መፍትሄ ማግኘት ሊከብድ ነው። አካባቢ ሊኖረን ይገባል። የአፍሪካ ቀንድ ሀገራት 150 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ HOA ሆርን ኦፍ አፍሪካ የሚል ጽሑፍ ያለበት ፓስፖርትና ገንዘብ እንዲጠቀም በማድረግ የመፍትሄውን በር መክፈት ይቻላል። በጥቅም የአካባቢያችን ሀገራት ማለትም ሱዳን፣ ደቡብ ሱዳን፣ ኤርትራ፣ ጅቡቲ፣ ሶማሊያ፣ ኢትዮጵያ፣ ኬንያ እንዲሁም አወዛጋቢ ብሔራት ኦጋዴን፣ ሲዳማ፣ ኦሮሚያ፣ ሀዲያ፣ አማራ፣ ትግራይ፣ አፋር፣ ጋምቤላ እና የቀሩትም በአፍሪካ ቀንድ ማዕቀፍ ውስጥ አሻገር ወደፊት መመልከት የማይችሉበት ምክንያት የለም ብዬ አምናለሁ። አንድ የተሻለ መፍትሄ ግድ መኖር አለበት። አዲስ አካባቢ ማንነት ማግኘት የሚያስፈልግ ይመስለኛል። በምስራቅ አፍሪካ ሆነ በአፍሪካ ቀንድ ጃንጥላ ስር አንድ የጋራ ማንነት መፍጠር መቻል አለብን። ጣራችንን ከፍ ልናደርግ እንችላለን። ከፍ ባለው ጣራ ስር ሩቅ ተመልካች ራዕይ ሊኖረን ይችላል። ብሔር፣ ቋንቋ፣ ወደብ፣ ድንበር፣ ግጭት ምክንያት ሆኖ አካባቢ ሰላም አግኝቶ ስለ እድገት ማሰብ በፍጹም አይቻልም። የአካባቢ ህዝቦች በኢኮኖሚ በፖለቲካና ማህበራዊ ጉዳዮች ጥብቅ መተሳሰር ማድረግ አለባቸው ብዬ አምናለሁ። በመጨረሻ መራራም ቢሆን ከተጨባጭ እውነት ጋር መታረቅ ይገባል። በትክክል የሚበጀው በነባሩ የአፈና መንገድ በመቀጠል ሊከተል የሚችለውን የነገ አደጋ መገንዘብ ብቻ ነው። ለጋራ አካባቢ ጥቅም በቅን ልቦና ወደ ድርድር መምጣት ያስፈልጋል። ባለፈው በጎና ክፉ ታሪክ ላይ በመተማመን ብሔራዊ እርቅ በማድረግ አካባቢ ሰላምና እድገት ማረጋገጥ የቀረን ብቸኛ በጎ አማራጭ ይመስለኛል። ገለተው ነው።
Yeah, this something it's a calendar. Thank you. That's right. He's a writer. It's not a research paper. There's no question and answer. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Scale, for that service as well as Sai for making speech. Next, we're going to have Osa Award. Osa Annual Awards give awards to three individuals who have made distinguished contributions to the organization. Before we go there, just a few comments that are going to be given about the spread work. The English version of this speech is available. We'll make it available on through your, some of the mechanisms. You will get them soon. The Oromo version will also be made available, as well as his book, the one they tried to destroy, the one they tried to ban. Oromos, mostly from DC area, came together. They contributed money. That money was used to establish Chalto Publishing, and that book is here out there. Get your copy, support the fight, support the Oromo movement, and say no to those who want to censor and silence voices. Now I invite Professor Mohammed Hassan to come to the podium and present the awards. Professor Mohammed is the current chair of the Oromo Studies Association Board of Directors. Professor Bluma. All right. We have a slight problem of communication. We will continue with. Okay, it's here. It's here. Our apologies. We couldn't find our word.
Bonnie Hong Kong. Is Bonnie here? Oh, Fiduciary. Dr. Ibrahim to Jatezi. Can you tell? No. Officially, the president of the and I feel I was hesitant not to say anything because that is his job. Yeah.
One body, reefu yadubbatanii wanni irra deebi'anii jirtu haadha Osaati. Boordii keessa jirti waan isiin hojjettu reefu badhee ture. So amazing. Let me say the last 3-4 weeks, especially this last 2 weeks, I would get her email. She lives here, I think, around Washington, DC, like 3 a.m. And I go to work 6, 7, and I would call her to just leave a message on her voicemail, and she would pick up. What time did she go to bed? And especially this last 5-6 days, as we prepare for this conference, you just can't imagine the energy she has put into organizing this conference. She is the chairperson of the committee that organized the volunteers, and she was working with Garebo Benya to secure this venue. It's just a full-time job for her, not to mention the effort that Dr. Mohammed has been putting into the OSA leadership. So she deserves this award, and this year's OSA Lifetime Achievement Award goes to our member of the board of directors, Barney Holcomb. Please welcome Barney, and Barney, you come forward. I've been telling the conference attendants that you are the OSA Lifetime Achievement Award winner this year, and you deserve it. So honored and privileged. Okay. The second award from the Oromo Studies Association, it's called Distinguished OSA Service Award, and this award is going to Mrs. Yeshi Tolosa. And Yeshi Tolosa, Yeshi is a member of the executive committee. She's the treasurer, and she has done an amazing job. And always, Dr. Muhammad will refer to her as the most able OSA treasurer. And in fact, she was. And she do everything without being told. And in fact, this year, when she was the treasurer, I have not seen a single check. I delegated the whole thing to her. She would fundraise, she would go around and sell OSA's Journal of Oromo Studies copies and generate some fund for OSA. She would do everything. This she's doing well. She's a single mother. And there are many Oromos like her, but what she has been doing is just amazing. Then we said she deserves to be recognized. And this year's OSA Distinguished Service Award goes to our most able treasurer. Yeah. for one of the most outstanding students. I have come to know her only this year. But then when actually Jawar Mohammed, our president-elect, proposed her, I accepted a nomination just with one. I didn't hesitate because she is the president of the International Oromo Youth Association, and especially around the time Oromo University students were killed or probably massacred in numbers. She would be writing a lot of pieces and posts it on Facebook, and she's a student, and if one association has the image and then you don't see the organization, but when a person does something, then you start seeing that association. And this young lady, her name is Amani Badazo, the Osa outstanding student. Amani Badazo. In fact, in the fourth category, the award category is distinct. I think the Oromo State Association's institutional support award goes to a press that has been publishing the journal that press. That person is Kasaun Chakol, and Kasaun Chakol is the owner of the Red Sea Press, and this year's Osa Distinguished Institutional Award goes to the Red Sea Press, and the owner of the Red Sea Press is Kasaun Chakol.
Although we have not prepared an award, we would like to recognize members of our local volunteers who have made you stay here with us. Really a pleasant one. They did not even attend the conference because they are out there helping, preparing food, selling the books, and checking people coming here. I would like to read some of the names, and when I read your names, get up and be recognized. Lelo Ifara. You all will get up at once. Let me do that. You all will get up at once. Mimi Lata, Ita Makolim, Bermane Galato, Baisa Gamachu, Sudota Galan, Abdi Nuresa, Umegati, was the team leader, Lalisa Wari, Mati Daniel, Motuma Daniel, Ganal Daniel, Zubaira Ibrahim, Mechis Gabisa, Mambo Garba, Tigis Gamme, Robera Tasisa, Daniel Jawar, no, my son, I don't know, sorry. Marartu Galata, Hawi Itana, Bontu Itana, Kulani Galata, Wasan, Bilise Gutana, Bona Ragaza, Yari Ragata, Fakad, Fakare Dache, Bresa Adamo, Ezra Gameda, Lemmi Klaun, and the rest of you who by any mistake we forgot, and all of you, please get up, be recognized. Thank you very much.
Sorry, one correction. That was Brahane Galato. Brahane Galato. Sorry about that. I'm gonna take 1 minute. Warri Ram Kadiyo Jarate. Jolem Kuni, Dugaru Bachudab. They never say no. Anything I told them, anything Osa tell them, they took it personal. Please, anywhere Osa goes, the youth should really do the same thing. I am really proud of the DC youth. One more time, please give them a hand. Thank you, thank you.
Okay. So our next panel is the panel of the Oromo young professionals. Some of, you know, what makes them young is probably the age, and we shouldn't be saying. Most of them have been doing a very outstanding, amazing activism on the social media and have been educating and informing the Oromo here and back home on the current affairs. So I would like to call the panelists to the stage, and Zakia is the person who actually put together this panel. So I'll call Dr. Zakia Pozi, who has been part of the OSA leadership in the past, and now she continues to be in our in the OSA leadership. So Dr. Zakia Pozi, please come forward to the podium and take the charge.
Just give me 1 second. We gotta wait.
My name is on the program as a moderator. I think I should also introduce these young scholars. Zakia, who has just finished her PhD. She has been with OSA for a long time. She has been in the leadership for a long time. She has, so she chairs and she presents also a paper is Oromo student activism, past and present, contextualizing transitional student activism on the Oromo. You have heard about the Amane Gadaso. She's a political science and a legal studies student with a research concentration on international security. Currently, as you heard, she's the president of the International Oromo Youth Association. Her topic is the utilization of social media, affairs, and the access of advocacy tools by International Oromo Youth Association. The third person is Ayantu Treso, another known person. She plays the experiences of Oromo diaspora activism. We have then Mohammed Ademo. All of you know who he is. He is a journalist working on Oromo crime, and he has been contributing to, to information on the Oromo for a while now. And these are the young Osa generation. And no, you have to.
Just again.
Yeah, and then I have to take it down.
This is the one. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk today about Oromo youth activism, past and present. The title of my paper is called Oromo Student Activism, Past and Present, Contextualizing Transnational Student Activism Among the Oromo. So in this paper, I'm going to sort of be moving back and forth between the past and the present, and between the Oromos in the homeland and the Oromos in the diaspora. Okay. So this year marks the start of the Ethiopian Revolution, the emergence of Oromo political organizations, and the birth of Oromo diaspora organizations in places like Washington, D.C. Oromo students were instrumental in all of these institutions and political struggles, and have been at the forefront of Oromo nationalism since the 1960s. Frequently, Oromo students in Ethiopia and those schooling abroad work together to develop, articulate, and support Oromo nationalism. Among Oromo immigrants in the US and in Europe, Oromo student organizations were often some of the first Oromo institutions established in the diaspora. Student activism among the Oromo has had a lasting impact. This paper seeks to contextualize Oromo youth activism over the last decade and highlight the transnational character of Oromo youth activism from its beginnings up to the present moment. So I want to give you a little background and talk about youth and the role of youth in activism today. So the term youth is a social position defined in a variety of ways depending on who is writing and talking about this segment of the population. Around the world, the term youth has expanded to capture more and more people. The delayed onset of adulthood and self-sufficiency can be attributed to a number of social and economic factors, including later age of marriage, the lengthening of higher education, and prolonged job instability. For Africa are obstructed in their quest for self-sufficiency. In Africa, the AIDS epidemic, resource conflict, failing and corrupt states, and massive unemployment and ethnic and religious discrimination have led to a decline in the well-being and advancement of the youth in Africa. Because the youth are the largest segment of the African population, we need to understand the ways in which this category of people has and will reshape social relations and power formations. In fact, to comprehend the role of youth activism in Africa, in African society today, understanding generational conflict is paramount. African youth living in the post-colonial era, especially those in Ethiopia, have been in a precarious position characterized by social and economic exclusion and blocked social mobility, which now has taken on a structural character. Because democratization is not deeply established and old elites monopolize power, regime change often occurs through violent means. African youth, on the other hand, the youth in Africa have also shown agency and peace. So now I want to talk to you guys about the Ethiopian student movement and then the Oromo movement. One of the earliest examples of an autonomous youth movement on the continent of Africa was the Ethiopian student movement of the 1960s and 70s. The students were the only segment of the Ethiopian society to publicly support the coup of 1960. In addition, due to the absence of a strong civil society, Ethiopian students became the dominant voice of ideological contestation against the imperial regime. Leftist discourse that Ethiopian students developed influenced the military officers that took over the country in 1974 and Ethiopian politics in a myriad of ways well known to this audience. So I don't need to go into that. In addition to issues of economic inequality, the Ethiopian student movement sought to, in addition to issues of economic inequality that the Ethiopian student movement sought to improve, the Oromo, due to the way they were incorporated into Ethiopia, experienced ethnic discrimination. Starting in 1963, the Mashitulama Self-Help Association and the Valley Rebellion were reactions to economic exploitation and cultural discrimination. Further, Oromos involved in the Ethiopian movement began to challenge the ways the movement addressed the national question. For a subset of the Oromos involved in the Ethiopian student movement, class and ethnicity were inextricably linked. Within the Ethiopian student movement, the Eritrean right to self-determination was seen as a colonial case and grudgingly accepted by some radicals, but Oromo incorporation and the nation would cease to function. So by the 1970s, a small minority of Oromo students and activists began to flee the country due to Ethiopia's crackdown on ethnic, student, and regional movements. And here I would like to talk briefly about Oromo student activism in Washington and the legacy of student activism in DC. So this year marks the 40th anniversary of Oromo activism and institution building in DC. And according to early settlers to the DC area, living in the diaspora provided the Oromos the space in which to separate without fear of reprisal. Oromo scholars and activists living abroad used the freedom of speech and association guaranteed them in the West to develop institutions from which to criticize Ethiopian scholarship and politics. Due to ethnic discrimination and persecution meted out against dissent in Ethiopia during the 1970s and 80s, it would not be an exaggeration to assert that the Oromo diaspora, through its ethnic institutions, came to act as the voice of Oromo dissent globally, at least during the early days. It was in part this lack of appreciation for the ways in which ethnicity had been wedded to class and the suppression of Oromo concerns that led to the emergence of the first Oromo-specific student organizations in the nation's capital. In DC, scholars like Sisai Ibsa and Lube Beru played a pioneering role in establishing early Oromo institutions in the diaspora. Tokuma Oromo Organization in North America was established in 1974, but soon after its creation, it became the Union of Oromo Students in North America. As the students began to mature, the organization again morphed to the Union of Oromo in North America. This group sought to educate Oromos living in the diaspora that had experienced discrimination, but lacked the language to verbalize their perspective. In addition to dissidents, the organization also attracted assimilated Oromos seeking their roots. During the early days, there was not an Oromo community center as such, so the Union of Oromo Students in North America and then Union of Oromo of North America acted as a multi-purpose institution that served a variety of functions for the Oromo diaspora in the city. It hosted community events and cultural functions, established study groups, and produced publications, and it acted as a contact point for information about the Oromo struggle being waged in Ethiopia. In 1975, Tuna produced its first publication, Sagale Oromo, meaning the voice of the Oromo, and starting in 1976, the Union, USONA started a publication called Walanso. Walonso was published in DC and was circulated nationally. In Walonso, Oromo contributors attempted to demonstrate and publicize the colonial nature of the Oromo and the Abyssinian encounter. In articulating and pushing the thesis, Walonso sought to provide needed justification to legitimize the creation of an independent Oromo state. In 1984, Kindling Point emerged as a running commentary on Oromo society that acted as the precursor of Oromo blogs. Pamphlets and short publications were the key route through which Oromo students articulated their views against the emperor and later of the Derg regime. Oromo discourse producers in the diaspora were agents of change because their critiques helped to denaturalize and challenge popular notions of Ethiopia. In time, the influence of these accounts brought about a change in how the Oromo conceptualized themselves and what they expected from the society in which they were the majority. And so now I want to move to a discussion of the Oromo student movement in Ethiopia. Now let's move forward in time and discuss student activism in Ethiopia during the current regime. There was a reduction in student activism within Ethiopia until the turn of the millennium, the Red Terror, and Mengistu's liquidation of dissenting voices in the country left an indelible mark on all groups living in Ethiopia, including the Oromo. Those that survived were traumatized and silenced or forced into exile. It was not until a new generation of students matured that Oromo students' voices began to reemerge with the coming of age of the Kube generation. Dr. Mukuria discussed contemporary youth activism in Ethiopia, so I shortened this aspect of my paper. But as he said, in 2000 you had protests over the Bale fires. In 2004, students were protesting all around the country and being arrested for protesting the move of the capital to Adama. And most recently, Oromo students assembled a huge numbers to protest the proposed expansion of Addis Ababa that had the potential to intensify Oromo economic exclusion. The social and political environment that characterizes Ethiopia today plays a major role in shaping the lives of Oromo youth and the nature of their activism. 44% of the Ethiopian population is under the age of 14, and nearly 20% is between the ages of 15 and 24. As a result, almost 2/3 of the population is under the age of 24. Since the Oromo are the largest ethnic group, it is the Oromo youth that pose a problem for the current government that seeks to block its social mobility and the equitable distribution of the nation's resources. Instead of devising methods to economically and politically incorporate the youth within society, the current government has engaged in tactics to limit its participation. For instance, school administrators force teachers to monitor students. The 2009 Charities and Societies Proclamation and the Anti-Terrorism Proclamation land, but Oromo diaspora youth are also active. If you give me a minute, I'll kind of skip over some of the newer social media, Oromo use of social media, and just move to the similarities and differences I see between activism today and in the past. Okay, I'll try to be fast. Okay, let's deal with a couple of similarities between Oromo activism during the 1960s and 70s and today. So, Oromo persecution has not abated over the last 40 years. The Oromos were political minorities in the 1970s and remain so today. Oromo student activism in the past and today is transnational in nature, meaning that activism during its early years and today is global. Members of the Oromo diaspora, due to their freedom of speech, are able to use the mass media to mobilize support for Oromo nationalism and human rights violation through discourse creation and fundraising. So let's look at some differences. During the 1970s, Oromos were involved in the creation of novel organizations at a time when few formal and modern organizations existed. Today, Oromo youth organizations enter into a terrain characterized by a plethora of organizations, characterized by increased ideological diversity. Today, Oromo diaspora organizations are more specialized and not as multi-purpose. And then I'll move. during the 60s and 70s. The generational conflict the Romos experienced was between themselves and the dominant ethnic group. And today, Oromo youth not only have I would like to end with this. We are here to mark 40 years of activism. Moses led the Israelites around in the desert for 40 years before the youth entered the promised land. If we look closer to home, to traditional Oromo society, the goddess system provided a legitimate means to deal with generational conflict as it relates to politics, where 40 years mark generational transfers of power. Today, Oromo youths are poised to enter into the political terrain, but there must be a way to transfer power and skills to the youth if the future is to look brighter these next 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Just your time. Okay.
Let's see.
Next person.
I think it's Aylan.
Sure. I can go. Do we need to get the mic over here?
Yeah.
All right, can you hear me? Is this okay? You can't see me? So I started thinking about my topic in the fall of 2011 while I was still in graduate school, where I studied international development and communications. And the more and more I read the literature on diaspora, transnationalism, organizing, youth, development, the more it became clear to me that the dichotomy often presented about diasporas being good or bad for homeland development actually distracts from more important and nuanced discussions that really need to be had. And most importantly, I realized that much of the literature is focused on what the diasporas can do for the homeland, with little attention to the dynamics of particular diasporas themselves. There is a faulty and unquestioned assumption that, one, diaspora communities are always able to contribute to homeland development, and that they are well equipped to do so. This assumption often results in invisibilization, and it makes it difficult to discuss the often very complex, contradictory, messy realities of diaspora development and homeland unproblematically. They're very problematic terms, and there's been decades of debates ongoing on both of those terms, but obviously, because of time, I can't go into those. Let's see. Diasporas are often looked at for what they can do for the homeland, which is seen as an end in itself. But I think diaspora communities are interesting as they are, whether they are actively engaged in pushing for social and political changes within their countries of origin or not. A significant population in the world is becoming more diasporic. So I think the experiences of diasporas is in itself important, and looking at the dynamics is just as crucial. So this is sort of the larger picture or framework which informs my ongoing research, which is the idea that unless we appreciate the dynamics within diaspora communities, we won't be able to understand how and why they can be engaged in development and how they can effectively be mobilized to get engaged in development work. And more importantly, I think there is a lot to be gained by looking at diaspora communities. As a person in the diaspora, it has been quite a journey for me, reading, learning about what it's like to live in the diaspora, why it is that people end up in a diaspora, and what is a diaspora anyway. I started informal conversations and eventually doing more formal interviews and observations in the summer of 2012 with young Oromos who had been involved in youth organizing in different capacities, mostly from the US and Canada. Most of them had been involved in youth organizing in the past and had moved on to something else, and some were still actively involved in organizations. And after a while, certain themes began to emerge that different from those faced by other youth organizations, such as how do you sustain engagement over the long haul? How do you attract new members and securing funding and human capacity to accomplish mission and vision? But there are also challenges that are unique to Oromo youth because of their location and positionality in a diaspora community. A couple of things that become relevant from these discussions. One, that diaspora youth organizing has to be understood within its own context. And two, Oromo youth have specific kind of challenges that need to be addressed if robust youth communities and organizations in the diaspora are to be effective and to also survive in the long term. So what does it mean to look at youth organizing through a diasporic lens? It means to look at the politics that influences the way Oromo youth think about themselves and who they organize with, what they organize about, and the challenges that they have to face because their experiences are so different and diverse. Social work practitioner, scholar, and community activist Kue Kumsa has spent over a decade studying the experiences of Oromo youth, and this is what she has to say. The violence of dislocation and the ensuing alienation from the homeland and its socio-cultural, material, and spiritual resources, the violence of realization and poverty, and the ensuing alienation from mainstream Canadian society, the violence of intergenerational conflict and ensuing alienation from family and community, and finally, the and you need to heal from these ailments if they are to organize robustly and if they are to have their own vision. Oromo youth are more than vessels of political ideology. They are resourceful, they are able to think for themselves, and they have to have the space to be independent and to dream of a future which they can create. I think a lot of the Oromo youth that I've talked to need space to create our own vision. We need space to create our own methods, our own practices, and our own values. Thank you.
Hamilton. Towards the end of April 2014, Oromo students rallied on the streets of Oromia, Ethiopia, in order to protest against the new Addis Ababa integrated master plan. The Ethiopian security forces responded by massacring, imprisoning, and torturing innocent peaceful protesters, which were mainly students. Ethiopia is greatly known for repressing and controlling the nation's media outlets. The country's monopoly of repressed freedom and crackdown on innocent students created a large-scale youth activism in the diaspora. Oromo youth with access to technology utilize social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter to tell the stories of innocent students being unlawfully detained for peaceful protests. Through vitalization of social media and the usage of hashtag Oromo protests and free Oromo students, youth activists were able to reach wide array of audiences on a global scale. This form of activism has also created a lot of platform for discussion on issues pertaining to the recent Oromo protests developing in Ethiopia. My topic focuses on identifying effective advocacy tools employed with a concentration on International Oromo Youth Association and the role of social media. In addition, my topic also explores successes and failures of those advocacy tools employed. Now, I'm going to ask every one of you in this room, who uses Facebook and Twitter? Can you guys raise your hands? Now, I want you guys to look at each other. Keep them raised. I would probably say about 8% utilize Facebook and Twitter. Since the student protests in the Oromia region, online activism has rapidly increased. As mentioned earlier, the Ethiopian government's tight control monopoly over press freedom has left numerous groups in Ethiopia hopeless and unable to get their issue across. In fact, communication between families back home and diaspora has decreased in a significant manner due to the recent crackdown on innocent students. So what ought the diaspora do when press freedom is non-existent in Ethiopia and is unable to display the world the crisis that is occurring in Oromia? What is the most accessible tool that anyone and everyone can utilize in order to assure that the silenced are heard? There is one simple answer. Turn to the most powerful entity currently, and that is the social media. Today I will be discussing and discussing recent campaign that International Oromo Youth Association has released, and that is the hashtag Free Oromo Students campaign. So on Friday, June 17, 2014 of this year, IOYA released a documentary on the recent Oromo protests. The short documentary contained personal and or witness accounts of two Peace Corps volunteers, international human rights attorney, and students with diverse backgrounds who stated their objecting opinions on the recent crackdown on innocent unarmed peaceful protesters. The aim of the documentary was to present factual-based information in hopes that the public will be able to understand the current crisis. The content included info on the Oromo people's relationship with Ethiopia, the Addis Ababa master plan, the student protests, and what happened as a result of that protest. The information gathered was thoroughly evaluated prior to release, including the facts in the documentary, with the assurance that there are no misplacement of facts and or policies. The documentary's aim is to call for a global solidarity with the Oromo students and to also show the world the current crackdown on peaceful protesters. Upon the documentary's release, there were over 5,000 views on the first day. And on June 28th, IOYA launched their social media campaign, hashtag Free Oromo Students. The campaign focused on asking for the immediate release of thousands of students that were unlawfully detained, several at an undisclosed location. And utilizing social media, main targets and individuals to gain attention from were journalists, mass media, government, and international organizations that focus on such issues. The usage of social media to increase momentum and awareness about the movement paved path for a new form of media that is able to reach the global community. The Free Oromo Students campaign also created a platform activism that can also be carried out in numerous ways. The usage of various strategies such as picture sharing, video, status updates have helped enhance awareness about the movement. The campaign was essentially able to gain mass number of followers within the first few days alone. In order to reach followers from different geographical locations, which I'm certain that all of you are aware is quite difficult, social media was very utilized. As opposed to mass media, social media is accessible and can be used by anyone who has access to any technological advances, such as internet. Now, for approximately 4 months, I did my research on the Occupy Wall Street and the utilization of social media. And the topic being discussed among scholars currently is the usage of social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter as a platform for increasing knowledge about social movements and recruiting supporters. Researchers like Constanza Choke are seeking to find what recruitment strategies were implemented on popular social media sites, which ones were most effective and which ones In the context of the Free Oromo Students campaign, in particular, what attracted viewers and supporters that came from not only Oromos, but wide number of other individuals that were non-Oromos. In particular, storytelling, status updates, pictures, and videos proved to be the most effective in facilitating support for the Free Oromo Students campaign. Interestingly, we concluded that on Twitter, most of the followers that engaged in the Free Oromo Students campaign already had prior knowledge because most of the Twitter users were already aware of the Oromo protests. All tactics used, such as links, photos, and videos, were effective in getting documentation across. Now, we all understand and there's no free press in Ethiopia, so utilizing whatever documentation was available was absolutely crucial in ensuring that people who are not aware of the Oromo protests understood what the protests were about. So what did the agenda look like for the Free Oromo Students campaign? Then the first, as I mentioned, we shared a documentary that included a lot of facts about the protests. What our journalists would actually tell them what's going on without having to go into the documentation, which we do not have access to. Along with that, sharing articles that pertain to the Oromo protest was also absolutely essential. The most essential effective tool that we were able to utilize was personal accounts. I am sure most of you guys have viewed Osa Hassan's story. We believe that his story was a symbolic story for the many thousands of Oromo students that are unable to get their story across to the world. So the utilization of symbolic stories was absolutely essential in getting response from journalists and or international organizations. Now, one of the most effective tools also was sharing a letter with social media followers as far as what can you do to help this movement. Obviously, a youth organization cannot do much as far as what ought to be done after this campaign was to take place. But assuring that everyone was on board and sharing their solidarity was absolutely essential in assuring mass media picked up the story. Now, the list of social media-oriented language. Language is about the most essential tool in getting your story across. The way you tell your story pretty much sums up how other individuals will listen to it or not listen to it. As a diaspora-based international youth, I only refrain from using any language pertaining to any outside objective than what the students in Oromia were protesting for. Most of what was said in regards to the students is focused on actions that can be taken in order to assure the further crackdown on innocent students. So what was most essential? You get your story across. What happens after that? What is it that you want the world to do after they hear the story? So I really focused mainly on action-oriented tools. Below are the language employing state terrorism, respect electorates and citizens' populace right to peacefully protest. So languages that the world can orient with, and languages that the world can understand. In addition, the campaign focused on ensuring that individuals involved in the campaign used similar language, meaning that we have the same aim and goals when we're explaining our issue. As I mentioned, targets were mass media, journalists, and or international organizations. Now, this campaign is out for the world to see, but the most essential thing for any campaign is to assure that there's important personnel that pick up the story and can implement some changes. Since I'm rushing, I'm going to go really fast. So what were the failures as far as the campaign goes? What did not go right? The lack of enough information accessible to attackers simultaneously. Journalists are mainly focused on documentation. If they do not have documents or the facts, they simply cannot cover the story. So that was the most, we had much lack of that in order to get the issue across. Lack of momentum for the campaign among all groups. we assumed that when this campaign was out, we would get a lot of followers and or a lot of support. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Lack of response from various influential persons, such as, and if in any campaign, influential people come out and say they support a certain cause, usually people go along with it. So there was much lack of that for this particular thing. For the issue, there were very numerous issues going across the world. Unfortunately, this issue was not paid as much attention as we would have wanted to. Lack of strategic language to utilize while attracting global solidarity among other groups that were using the hashtag #FreeOromoStudents. The most important take from the campaign is that it is absolutely important. More importantly, it is essential to have an aim and a goal by laying out strategies to assure for a successful campaign. Thank you.
Dr. Bokra, I beg you, sir, give me 2 minutes before I start my conversation. While I do that, here they will set up my slides. So last year I stood on this stage and talked about the need for Oromo media as a way out of the current crisis, because as you all know, the Oromo story has not been told, and that remains. At that point, we were off of a conversation that took place on the media that I now work for. At that point, I did not work for Al Jazeera. That conversation took place on Al Jazeera. And it led to so many things, as you know, a lot of great things. Now, as a result of that 30-minute conversation, which was very much, it barely scratched the surface of the Oromo story or the trials of the Oromo people in Ethiopia. But nonetheless, lucky for us, one good from the Oromo, and then the other one obviously negative from the outside. That led to the creation of what is now the Oromo media. There is a person behind all of this. Myself and my friends like Jawar Muhammad have gone around the country and around the world and were recognized as heroes. But the real hero who put that together, who put that show together, who called me one June morning to wake up from sleep and tell Al Jazeera to cover these stories with us today. So I want to ask you all to help me recognize my dear friend and colleague, Raisa Zaidi. She's the one who did the show. Please stand up. Stand up. She gave you the Oromo first, she gave you the Oromo media first. So that's the person we should all be very grateful for. And just while I'm on that, she also created this banner that I'm using in the background. So I apologize for not seeking your permission. So a lot has been said about social media, the importance of it, about Facebook and Twitter. So I will not repeat that. Much has also been said about the Oromo protest. How do I do this thing? Okay. So I will just, I will not go back. Dr. Mokria, Zakia, and others have mentioned Oromo protest in history. I will not go back, but I will just mention that I've been very fortunate to have actually taken part in some of these protests. As a young high school student in the year 2000, I was part of the students that protested against the forest fires in Bale, in Borana. In the year 2001, then only starting a college in Oromia, I was part of the students that protested about academic freedom and so on and so forth. In May 2002, I was among the students who were arrested for protesting what was then issued high supplies they produced. Since I left Oromia from 2003 on, I have seen this protest occur every year. In 2003, 2004, when Finfinne was relocated to Adama, similar protests took place. A lot of students were dismissed. And then, of course, the Finchola Dida Garuma, which all of you guys know, in the most latest one, the 2014 Oromo student protest. I mentioned all this to say that in all these protests over the years, there are very similar recurring themes. It always ends the same way. First, mass dismissal of Oromo students and mass arrest of Oromo students, not just ordinary Oromo students, the best and the brightest Oromo students that our nation has ever produced. And when I say that, I think of students like Alamario Garba, a fellow, a young disabled Oromo student whom I have sat in class with. So those are the kind of people that we lost in this. So the other thing, there is always lack of communication, as Amane talked about. There is just not information coming out of Ethiopia. We don't even hear this protest taking place or how many people are arrested. So when Garoma Wakesa gives you a number of students that are arrested, that's just what we know. There's so much more that we don't know just because there is no information. And then the other thing is there is general lack of media coverage, both within Ethiopia and also abroad. Now, the other obviously issue is that these protests continue to reoccur because the Oromo grievances remain the same. The Oromo voice is not being listened to, the Oromo questions remains unaddressed. But there are some important differences that I would like to note in this year's protest. First, obviously, more people died this year. This is very unfortunate compared to the previous year in just a few days. And obviously, social media was a big player this year. And obviously, there are questions of self-rule in from video that, to an extent, played a role. Diaspora has been very instrumental in taking the small sound bites, amplifying it, and sharing it with a much broader audience. Now, we've said all this, so we say about social media, but I want to give you some numbers so that by the end of my presentation, I hope that those of you who are on this book will sign up, recognizing just how important this tool is. There are about 1.8 billion active global users on Facebook today. Just think about it. According to the ICU, which is a UN organization that studies telecommunication, there are about close to 1 million people in Ethiopia using social media. That is about 1%, 1.1% of the total population. According to the Ethio Telecom, there are about 4.6 million internet subscribers in Ethiopia, about 2,363 internet cafes, and about the same, roughly about the same number that the ICU uses, so about 1.7 million Ethiopians on Facebook. The other, probably most important tool that people don't even consider as social media is YouTube. There are about 1 billion plus total users on YouTube. About 80% of that traffic comes from US. 6 billion hours of video is watched on YouTube every month. And the list goes on. And then Twitter, of course. So there are about billion plus users and about 500 million tweets per day. Tweets is 140 messages that you post on Facebook, but some of you might be asking, what can you say in 140 characters? Because this is an academic audience. So it is based on hashtags. So I say all this, that in the last 10 years, I took part in so many rallies and so many protests that we've done in the diaspora. But all these years, I'll tell you today that we've been looking at the wrong place. So we neglected a large, big audience. If YouTube and Twitter were a country, that is the whole of Africa's population. So instead of standing in front of White House and holding up banners and hoping that some folks passing by will pay attention, we neglected a much larger audience that is easily accessible and almost free to do. We don't have to drive from Minnesota to Washington, D.C., as I have done in my prime to do that. So you can do it from the comfort of your home. Now, What can you say in about 140 characters? These are just some of the examples. When Janjan Desa was speaking yesterday, we were posting sound bites from his presentation. On the other side, if you could read, Ayantuti Peso was talking about the Machatulama. In 140 characters, you can write a book. You can turn your book into a tweet if you just think about it. So there's so much more you can do. But the most, oh my God, I didn't even get started. So the other important tool is blogging. Blogging is sort of fading out as people focus on social media, but this is also a very important medium. About 6.7 million blogs, 77% of the internet users read blogs. You can read the rest. I'm gonna zip through this. So, in all of this, for all the great things that came out of the protest this year, there are so many things that we did wrong. Just because we don't pause to study and learn best practices from other organizations. This is not me being critical. I'll show you how it was bad. These are some of, on the other side, you will see some of the best practices. Always use one hashtag. Make sure you just talk from Osa. Say, tell us what is happening on this panel, not just that Mohammed Adamos is speaking on the stage. That doesn't say much. So some of the examples we'll be using Osa 2014. Osa 2014 itself is a story. So if you know about Osa 2014, the conference, it was very simple. MTA 50, Majat Ulama Association at 50. So be creative, short, precise. But this is what we did for the Oromo protest. For one protest, there were about 6 hashtags. As a journalist with a deadline sitting at a desk, which one am I going to follow to tell your story? It's very confusing. Which one is about Oromo? Which one is about something else? Say no to Addis expansion. Say no to land grab, Oromo protests, Oromo students, Finfinne for Oromo. One would have been just enough. So when my friend Reza was doing the story about the protest, I had to explain to her all these were about Oromo so that she could pick the most important sound bites from this. So it's very important that we know how to use tools. And this is just one example of where I've seen some misuse of that. And then the other thing is on Facebook. Look at this. Check. 4 groups dedicated to the protest. The first one has about 1,000 members. The second one has about 7,500 members. The other one, you can look at the numbers. But why did we need all these groups? Can one be enough? And then we all organize, get into one of them that will actually have more impact. The same thing on this side. The same thing on this side. So there are 3 groups, just as an example. This has about 53,000 members. This is right. If 50,000 people here are in one group, we have a force that is 80,000 strong. So organizing is not just at Osa or on the street. You can also organize online. So what was the coverage of the Oromo protest like? On the Oromo side, much was poorly reported. I'm guilty. Lack of creativity. Just saying that protest happened is not enough. Saying that people were dead is not enough. We have to learn how to tell the Oromo story, and we can. And then obviously there are lack of issues with lack of professionalism in the way that it's presented, because when journalists who are not Oromo look at this, you want them to take you serious. If it is not quality, if it is not professionally done, people are just going to move on to the next thing, because guess what? Ukraine is blowing up. Venezuela is blowing up. Gaza is blowing up. There are so many much more pressing human rights issues around. You have to make your story compelling to get people's attention. That was the case. So I've also seen people using all the images from 2005 from the Muslim protest as this. This creates an issue because you are misrepresenting the voice of the students, and you're not telling the story of what is happening now. And in an effort to be to stand in solidarity with them, you would do that. On the other end, on the other side, the mainstream media side, I think compared to previous years, things were better. Having allies like our friend at Al Jazeera, in a few early analyses that we've published, were very effective, because when a journalist comes to me and say, what should I read as a background for the Oromo protest, we could have done a lot more, but that's a whole different issue I don't have time for. Now, on Oromo media, the same problems I talked about last year remains. We still dance to our own music. Oromos are still doing media for the Oromo. That's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to get us anywhere. We have to get out of that. We focus so much on this idea that you bring experts and just talk for 30, 40 minutes about an issue. We have to be creative, package it, and present it. Talking about an issue that is very much obvious. The operation of Oromo is not new. We don't need to keep repeating that. We have to get better. Dr. Benya mentioned this morning about lack of coverage in other areas, for example, health. Look at every media organization that is run by Oromos. Everything that you get, including overhead, I'm guilty as charged. Everything that we do is politics. This is not going to work. We have to focus on health, daily living, art, and other things. As I said last year, being Oromo is much more than just doing politics. I think Dr. Gupta was very clear and precise today, all out to do the same thing. If you're a journalist, do journalism. If you're an engineer, do engineering. So there's a room for everybody. Again, as I said last year, continued fragmentation. I don't understand why we have to keep opening websites and radios. There are so many websites and radios and TVs. Build one, make it strong. That's the only way we can get ahead. Of course, there are very technical reasons also for websites. I see websites almost every month. Just one more minute. I see a new website every month. They all do the same thing. They post the full article from another website on their blog. That creates an issue. When Google comes to my website and indexes the story, for the first time, it actually appears on top of Google search for Ethiopia. When the next person copies the same story and puts it on another blog, Google says, oh wait, whose story is this? So Google automatically drops that. So just by using the same text and the same title to repost, for no other reason when you can just send the traffic to the original website, you create an issue where the Oromo story will fall from the top. Unfortunately, I can't get through all the details. Again, I've said this so many times before at Osa, Oromo elites need to start writing more and more. People, there are great books out there by Oromo scholars, but when the news breaks, when students are dying in Oromia, people want to understand, they're not going to go find Dr. Mokria's book and read. There's just no time for it. Journalism runs fast. I'm slow today, but that doesn't mean that. Most of all, I would just say this in close. We really need to understand the power of social media networks. There's a reason why it is called network. It works by networking. I have 2,000 members. Ayantu Tepeso has friends. Ayantu Tepeso has 2,000 friends. Not all are the same. So if Ayantu reshares the story that I posted, I already reached 2,000 people. She also reached another 2,000 people. The chain goes on and on. How many of you guys are here? We probably can come up with about 20, 30,000 people in this room if we add our members on Facebook. Unless you share my story, the story that I posted, your friends won't be able to see it unless we have common friends. So we have to understand there is so much power in a click, in just a click. All you really need to do is click, share, in any you share with your audience. So we really need to learn to use those things. Keep this, and if you want to connect and talk about this more, obviously I didn't have time. This is my information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for brilliant presentations. How many minutes do we have, Dr. Ibrahim? 10 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. First, Dr. Are you guys taking the questions or talking? So, yeah, it's time. I think when you ask for the transfer of power, 40 years, that's the Oromo way. In 40 years, power transfer. That's right. You're asking for space. Give us space. We need space. Let me say what the philosopher Nietzsche said. You have your way.